When you have your hand in another man's pocket, you must move when they move. When you have your hand in another man's pocket, you must move when they do what? You must move when they move. What does this African proverb mean? What does this proverb mean? Waba oine engaro zawe omushaho y'ondiijo muntu ninga eshaho y'ondiijo mushaija ninga mukazi noba oine kutambura kwimuka okatambura bakola ki nabo batambura waba oine engaro zaawe omushaho y'ondiijo muntu noba oine kutambura nabo bimuka bakakola ki bimuka bakatambura. This is our series on African proverbs. The wise sayings. Our ancestors knew very well that we would need these wise sayings so that we can learn lessons, so that we can learn ways of behaving. And this proverb is one of them. So this proverb, what do you think is really talking about? You know, when you have your hand in another man's pocket, you must move when they move. You must move when they move. This proverb is talking about lack of control if you are relying on other people. You know, this proverb is talking about lack of choice, you know, lack of the capacity or ability to make decisions, especially if you are relying on other people. I will link it very well to finances. I think this really plays out very well when we think about finances. And anyway, pockets. This is about money. This is about relying on other people for finances. I'll give scenarios where if you rely or if you have your hand in another man's pocket, you must move when they move. I'll give you some scenarios. The one that just came in my mind is what happened when Trump, the president of United States, announced that he was cutting aid or the donations that the American government, American people used to give to so many countries, including many African countries, and so many non-governmental organizations that were actually relying on this USAID funding, if you have heard of USAID funding. So Trump just woke up one morning and said, I'm cutting salaries. I'm cutting all the money that is going into USAID, all the money that is being spent, that is being sent to other countries, and NGOs are relying on this money. So do you know what happened? NGOs in this sense, or other governments, African governments included, had their hand in the pocket of the US government, the USA government. And you know what? They had to move because the US government had moved on. So Trump cut the funding. And what happened? Most NGOs that were relying on USAID funding, they couldn't continue running programs to the communities. People who were employed and were getting their funding, their salaries through USAID funding, they lost their jobs, which is so unfortunate. Communities lost programs and interventions that were being funded through USAID funding. So, colleagues, when you have your hand in another man's pocket, you must move when they move. You have no choice. I'll give you another example. At a personal level, when you're renting, the landlord makes all the decisions. They can wake up, just tomorrow and they say, I want my house because I want to give it to someone else, or I want to rent it out to businesses or whatever. You have your hand in the landlord's pocket. when you don't have your house, when you're still renting. I'll give you another example. When you have a job and and that's your only source of income, you have a job, you're relying on that job for almost everything. You have your hand in another man's what? In another man's pocket. If they move, if they fire you, if they wake up in the morning and say, "Hey, I don't want to see you anymore at my workplace, at my organization," they fire you, you're off. You can't say anything because you have no control on this what? On this job. This is something I've been really reflecting on, and it's the reality. Currently, my organization where I work is really going through a lot of job cutting is happening. And we literally, as employees, we literally have no choice over who stays and who goes. So in reality, I have my hand in another man's what? Another man's pocket, and I can't make any decision regarding whether I stay on my job or not. I think this is the reality that most of us are in. If you are relying on donations, if you are relying on begging, or maybe you might not really call it begging, but if you're relying on other people giving you money for rent, money for food, money for everything that you need in life, then this proverb describes you very well. Sooner or later, you might experience a lack of choice or lack of control. This is not a good scenario to be in. So our ancestors were challenging us to aspire for control. Financial control is very important. It's very important. It's the ladder towards financial independence. It's the ladder towards a step towards financial freedom. So today, I want to challenge you to think about or reflect on the situation that you are in, and reflect on if you really have your hand in another man's what? Another man's or woman's pocket. Soon you must move when they move, because you have no what? Because you have no choice. You can't really make any decisions. So I've given you some examples of this scenario. It could well be your situation. So it's very important that you start confronting. It's very confronting, and sometimes it's also like a taboo. You don't want to think about the control or the kind of choice that you have. Maybe you have a rich relative, and this rich relative is the one who is funding you everything, giving you money for rent, giving you school fees, giving you money for food, or paying, for your bills or your medical bills for the whole family. But I tell you, that's not really a good situation to be in, because maybe sooner or later they might make a decision not to actually give you any more money, and you have no control over that. So this is real awakening. It's very important that we work towards financial control, where we can make decisions over our finances, where we can make decisions on where we stay. We can make decisions on how much we spend on what. We can make decisions on how many hours we work or not, or how many hours we rest. We can make decisions on if it's 9 to 5, or if we work night hours or daytime. When you are still relying on other people, on your job, on donations, on charity, you really lack this control. You really lack this decision-making power. And it's a very vulnerable position to actually be in. So what is it that we should be thinking about when you hear this proverb? If you're an NGO, you're relying on donations, it's very important to think about your financial your financial control and the need to work towards financial control and sustainability. At a personal level, it's very important to think about ways to have income, to have diverse sources of income, so that you're not really relying on just one thing, or you're not relying on a paycheck to cover your living expenses, to cover all your basics of what? The basics of life. So this is where it's important that we think about investment, for example, at a personal level, so that you have diverse sources of income coming in to supplement your paycheck or to supplement your job, so that if you lose the job, at least you have some form of what? You have some form of money coming in to support your basics of life. So thinking about investment, different investment options. We will record, we record a video maybe on different investment options. One I have in mind is the unit, like unit trusts, which are really very big investment in Uganda at the moment. So thinking about other investment options like treasury bonds or even property, building investment properties where you're building rentals probably, or building, it could be apartments, it could be business houses that you can rent out, or hotels. So thinking about some form of investment, thinking about a business that could give you some form of income. Thinking about even ways to have passive income where the money is working for you without you necessarily having to show up, to gain some form of financial control. I think it's also important, especially when I think about finances, think about the importance of doing what? Of budgeting, so that you know where your money is going. Maybe that could also help you to take control of your finances, and also think about other strategies to raise your finances, so that you are not relying on other people. You are not relying on only your job. This is a journey that we must start using small steps, especially if we want to have some form of control, in the coming days that we are really uncertain about. So watch out for any more videos that we will record, maybe on budgeting, on investment options, but finances, the area of finances is really one very important area that can mess up your life, mess up your family, mess up your relationships, especially if you are just relying on other people to really finance your your living expenses. So think about your own situation. Let this be a trigger, let this be a stimulant to reflecting on if you really have control or choice, or if your hand is still in another person's pocket. Subscribe to this channel for more videos on how to grow yourself, on how to learn from the wisdom of our ancestors, the proverbs. I love proverbs. It's just very small words which speak so much to you, which speak so much on how you're expected to live, and the things that you must prioritize in life. Subscribe to Ankore Academy for more videos.